gentlemen. Good evening or good morning. I'm used to saying good evening. Good morning. It's good to see everybody here. I know you must be excited to be in a budget meeting. So, council members, anything before we dive in? Okay, Mr. B.
All right. Good morning, Mr. Mayor, members of City Council. So we're here to go through the presentation for the first budget workshop. Today's workshop will be the first of two this week. We're going to focus on the general fund today. We might have some references to some capital projects, but particularly the focus will be on general fund. On Thursday, we'll be doing the capital improvement program as well as the utilities. Good thought. Just waiting for it to come up on the screen. There you go. Okay. So whenever we put together a budget, we always make sure that it hits certain milestones. This budget for fiscal year 25, first of all, and most importantly, meets the City Council priorities. It continues the wage and benefit competitiveness, which is critical for our organization to stay in this marketplace. We have programmed the budget to include a new fire union contract. It also provides enhanced professional development, strengthens our succession planning, and seeks to enhance revenue streams, which we'll talk about towards the end of the presentation. It does not provide for an increase in overall city FTEs. However, there will be a new position and some converted positions, but overall the number will not change. And particularly, and probably most importantly, it does not anticipate an increase in millage. So let's talk about this past year. So we've had a very successful year so far. As you know, we started out the year with a 4% COLA, 2% performance incentive for general employees. We were also able to upgrade our health insurance for the first time. I think we're very competitive in the Tampa area. We made strategic wage enhancements where needed. For example, if we had departments that were struggling in terms of recruitment or retention, we went in surgically and made changes, and those things have really reaped rewards for those particular departments. We had the first year of our new contract with the police union, and we added extra training, including for the leadership team. We implemented a paid parental leave policy, which is a council priority. We also, thanks to the great idea of Carl Langfeld, our leisure services director, we implemented a discounted after-school and summer camp program for city employees, which is a nice perk. This past year, we've also made significant improvements in our staffing process. So this is one of those sort of people say, would you believe moments. So I'm not sure if the community would believe, but we had several positions on our recruitment calendar that were open for years, not months, but years. And since the arrival of Mr. Nazario as the HR director and his team and the work they've done, we've managed to reduce our onboarding time by over 52% for our positions. He has also had his team go to job fairs. We're really sourcing talent now. We're doing a lot of creative things, some of which will be discussed today. We find ourselves now in the enviable position of having quality candidates in our pool, whereas a couple of years ago, we were just struggling to find anybody. So I think we're in good stead. Most of our departments are fully staffed. Obviously, there's some turnover here and there, but compared to where we were, where I used to be, our list of recruitments was probably a page and a half long, and today you're probably looking at just, less than a half dozen at any given point. In terms of the fiscal year 25 now in the budget, so there are several cost drivers to any budget. Ours are primarily four. So wage competitiveness, as we mentioned, that's a council priority. In order to do that, you have to invest money. Like you have to invest money to make money, in essence, that expression. So for us, what this means in the 25 budget is that we are going to be seeing over a $1.1 million increase just for wages. That includes wage increases programmed for general employees, as well as for the police and the fire. Health insurance, it's always a big number. In order to offer those enviable benefits, we have to pay for those. We are budgeting a 12% increase for health insurance. Hopefully, our renewal will come in lower than 12%, but right now that's an estimate that we're using until we get the concrete information from our insurance broker. Other insurance, property insurance. If council recall, last year after Hurricane Ian, the Florida market was basically just pummeled with either insurance companies leaving or insurance rates going up. We were not exempt from that. we saw a 60% increase in our property insurance last year. This year, we don't have the renewal number yet, but we are programming 40%. Hopefully it will not be 40%. But again, we're trying to be as conservative as possible. General liability insurance, we're already seeing those increases. We're programming 25% there. And in our auto insurance, we have a program 10% increase. In terms of supplies and services, the average CPIU for the Tampa area a couple of months ago was about 4%. And when the budgets were submitted at the time, so everyone put in more or less an average 4% across the board for supplies and services in terms of cost increases. So you'll see that also. On the other side of the ledger, you've got the revenue. We are looking at three supporting revenue streams here. So ad valorem tax base increase. The property appraisers informed us preliminarily that we're seeing an increase of 6.1%, which equates to about $1.1 million. So now if you go back to the wage competitiveness piece, we had a $1.1 million just wage difference. So that's going to be totally consumed by, that will totally consume this tax base increase, basically. Interest income, the interest rates are still fairly favorable to us. We had a good year in terms of interest income this year. We are programming an additional $500,000 budget to budget, FY24 budget to FY25. We know that the recession is probably coming at some point. The interest rates will start to come down. I mean, they are starting to come down, but they might progressively come down. But we think $500,000 is a pretty good number to include there. And then there's other revenue. These are all the other myriad of revenues the city has, and we're programming about a 2% increase across the board for those. Again, trying to be conservative so that we don't miss the mark. One of the themes you'll hear throughout this presentation is efficiency. We have talked about, the council, the mayor in particular, has talked about we're good and we're getting better. We're trying to get to that high performance level. And to do that, I think we really have to look critically at our organization and make sure that we're not, where you can do things in 2 steps is great, but don't have 10 steps for the same thing that you can do in 2. And so we're trying to get through those things. So one of the things we found in the budget review process this year is that there were a number of departments that were doing a similar service. For example, they were providing pest service for their facility. They were providing smoke alarm inspections, fire extinguisher inspections, etc. But they were all doing it independently, hiring their own companies, paying for their own bills, etc. So what we wanted to do is say, well, that's a common service that's provided across the organization. It should be handled in one spot. So we've centralized that in this budget under the Public Works Facilities Division. You may ask, well, I see savings. What are the savings then? You probably won't see savings this year because we're transitioning everything over. I think once the Public Works Facilities manager has had a chance to get a year under his belt, where now he has contracts with one vendor for this and one vendor for that service, then I think next year you'll see those savings. But right now it's just in terms of efficiency where we want to go. We're also looking at, in terms of our procurement process, trying to make that not only efficient but also safer for the organization in terms of liability. We don't have a procurement officer, as you know. So when we have vendors, the hundreds of vendors we do have, we need to vet those vendors and make sure that their insurances, registrations, licenses, etc., are all up to date. That's a lot of work. Typically, a procurement staff would do that. Because we don't have that, one of the things we are proposing in this budget is actually acquiring software that allows us to do that, where the vendors will need to register using the software. The software then has a guarantee, basically, that provides us legal protection, so that in case something happens, we can say, well, no, you were vetted. So that's included in this budget as well. Another thing we're also doing here is we're combining some positions in the current proposed budget to provide a broader breadth of control. So rather than create new positions where just, okay, we're going to add to the FTE scale, what we've looked at critically is trying to figure out how can we make better use of our existing resources. So you're going to see that in terms of some of the changes we are proposing. And those are included on this particular slide. So let's walk through these. So the first one is we have a great Deputy City Attorney, Mr. Mueller. I'm not sure if he's actually in the room. He's not. And Mr. Mueller has been budgeted part-time, and we are proposing to make the Deputy City Attorney position a full-time position, which I think is needed in this organization. There is plenty of work. I'm sure the city attorney can testify to that. And I think we take advantage of the legal services here quite regularly. I know I do, and all the department directors do too. So making that a little bit more robust for us will help the city move forward. The second position we're looking to change is to convert the marketing assistant. So in the executive department, in the marketing division, Mary Bates is the current incumbent in that position. She's done great work. The team is really clicking right now, and we'd like to move that position to full-time. In HR, we talked about a few minutes ago some of the great improvements we're seeing in terms of our HR functions. Well, that's testament to the hard work that's going on in that department. We feel we can do a lot more in terms of again, networking, in terms of job creation, job fairs, recruitments, if we convert our current HR admin assistant to a full-time position. We are also in CD and community development. We are looking to do a change. We have an existing position, an admin assistant position, the incumbent there, Marissa Robinson, has been great and does a lot of great work for the city. And we're trying to find ways to more effectively address issues for when applications are submitted, having somebody coordinate those applications between the different divisions and different departments to make sure that we are less likely for errors to happen and for delays to happen. So we're proposing to convert that position to a plans coordinator. Marissa would still do admin assistant functions, but she would have this extra added role to her daily duties. In facilities, in Public Works, I should say, we're also proposing to convert the facilities manager to a deputy director of Public Works / facilities manager. We talked about succession planning. It's something that for an organization to make sure that we have all the people in line. If something happens to the person that's at the top, somebody else can step in. Also, it provides us an avenue for people to kind of grow into the organization, so that this makes sense for us. Again, it's taking advantage of the people we have in place, the great people we have in place in the organization. The last one is proposed to convert the HR director, Mr. Nazario, to an assistant city manager / director of HR along that same theme. There is one new position that is being proposed in the budget, and that is an accountant 3. In the finance department, Jim and Jennifer and Jamie and the entire team, they do an outstanding job. But they're working like 50, 60 hours a week. I mean, you see them all the time here. They're on weekends. I'm getting emails in the middle of the night. There's a lot of work on their plate, and a lot of work that really should be addressed at the sort of frontline level. But because we're staffed so thin in that department, we're not able to do that. So they end up doing a lot of the reconciliations, things like that an accountant might do. So we are proposing to address that by creating an accountant 3 position. There would be no increase to the city's overall FTEs because during the year, there were some FTEs that we actually strategically stopped funding, which council is aware of. And so because of that, our overall count will not change. Grant writing. So this is something that I struggled with for quite some time. The council has mentioned this in both council priority setting sessions that I've been at since I've been with the city. We looked at this. Right now, it's not something that I'm recommending to the council. And my logic is that in police and fire, for example, they do an outstanding job securing grants for their departments. In fact, they do such a great job that they've actually started to teach other department heads how to find grants. So that's great. It's like, train the trainer kind of thing. So I think they're doing pretty well, and I think they're being helpful to the rest of the organization. We also use a service that's provided to us by the state called eCivis. It's a grant searching software. We actually have a license here in the city. And what we'd like to do is actually move that license over to our grants coordinator. So our grants coordinator is not a grants writer, so I don't want to mislead anybody into thinking that. But what they do is they work on the back end. Basically, they're reporting, tracking invoices, and things like that. But we are thinking that we'd like to provide them with more training, get them to use this software to the point that they might be able to make more use of grant writing skills for this organization as a whole. In addition, one of the ideas that came to us, actually, Vice Mayor Abel had this idea. What if we provided grant writing as a class in terms of some of the education we're doing, training for the organization, bringing in somebody who could talk about, hey, this is some grant writing skills 101, and do that across the board. So we're looking at that as well in the budget. Along the lines of training, we are very focused on enhancing our professional development opportunities for our staff. One of the ideas I think the mayor may have had actually was the creation of an employee leadership academy. So this is an opportunity for you to cultivate a cohort or multiple cohorts of people within your organization. You recruit either frontline to mid-level employees, identify the people who are sort of the go-getters, and you bring them into a cohort where on a regular basis, maybe it's once a month or once every couple of weeks, you take them out of their typical work duties. You go to other departments, see how other departments function. You provide them training, for example, on the budgeting process or other things that are more 30,000-foot level observations than things that they would typically do. And in doing that, you've now created this future leader, and so if we have enough of that, I think we'll be better poised as the organization as we go forward. When we have turnover, you have people who are ready to take over, and they're trained, and they can be supervisors and managers, whereas before that wasn't the case. So we're very much looking forward to that. This budget also includes funding again of the leadership team retreat. That was a great educational session that we had this past year, so we'd like to keep that going. Our tuition reimbursement program, we have several people who do take advantage of it. What we found is when people turn in their receipts for reimbursement, the educational costs far exceed the reimbursement. I mean, there's cost inflation is dramatic in education. So we'd like to enhance that. Right now it's $2,000 per employee per year. We'd like to enhance that to $3,000 per employee. And then the final thing is something I think some of us are very excited about, which is this notion of having a paid student internship program. This was a council priority as well, and we've struggled with figuring out how do we fund this. One of the things you'll hear today a little bit, and you'll definitely hear on Thursday, is we are drawing down an unassigned fund balance. Not necessarily to balance the budget per se. It's not that for that reason, but we have unassigned fund balance. It's there, provides us usable dollars for one-time items, right? So this, we thought, why don't we use some unassigned fund balance revenue here to create a pilot program? We're not impacting the millage rate that way, and if the program turns out to be successful, we think we can probably fund about 5 paid internships throughout the year based on the amount of money we budgeted for this. Then if it's successful, next year we can look at it and determine, okay, how do we do this moving forward? So we're, again, very excited about this. In terms of pay for the year, because that's usually one of the critical questions, so what we are proposing for FY25 for general employees is a 4% cost of living adjustment. That would go into effect October 1. We are also recommending to continue the 2% performance evaluation incentive that's on their employee anniversary. And as I mentioned earlier, if there's areas where we find there might be some discrepancies, some issues with recruitment or retention, we'll also program in some strategic changes throughout the year. We will also contemplate the second year of the police contract is included in the budget again, as well as the new contract for fire. One of the questions we typically will get as well is, what are we funding in terms of economic development organizations? I know that's important for any organization that wants to be active and see development and tax-based growth, et cetera. We really have to have a seat at the table. This is the funding that's in the FY25 budget right now. So you see the Temple Terrace Uptown Chamber. There's $5,000 there. Plus, there's a Chamber Leadership and Innovation Program, which is basically the model that I highlighted for the Employee Leadership Academy. It's a similar model, but it's based on the community where they take you around to different concerns every month in the greater Temple Terrace area. The city is being requested to be a sponsor and to program a participant. So this $4,500 includes $3,000 for an actual member of the city organization to participate in that first leadership class. They're planning to kick that off next August August of 25.
Carlos, you want to pause for a second and tell them about the executive steering committee that we're involved in this?
Sure. So in creating these programs require a significant amount of planning, because if you think about it, these are high-level, day-long sessions where you're going from one business to another, to a government setting, et cetera. You're bringing people from, CEOs, mayors, et cetera, from all across the region. So it takes there's a lot of strategic thinking that's involved. So Debbie Prescott, the CEO of the Temple Terrace Uptown Chamber, convened a steering committee. The mayor and myself participate on that steering committee, and we are going to take the next year basically to map out these sessions for this program, with the goal again being next year then they'd have the first class. We would provide a student to that class, and I would expect, if the council would be okay with it, that as the program is successful, every year we would fund at least one student. Okay. The next item is Soaring City. The city council in the past had funded $10,000 for Soaring City. Soaring City is apparently no longer an entity, or will no longer be an entity shortly, from what we understand. In light of that, we've taken out the $10,000 from the budget, but there was a recommendation made to include $5,000, though, for what we're calling a strategic business opportunity. If something comes up during the year that's economic development based, that the council feels strongly about, we have $5,000 here that we could be a sponsor, for example. So it's really open-ended. So it gives you that flexibility if you would like to do something at some point, depending on what's identified. The Tampa Bay EDC, our Economic Development Council partners, the city has had a recurring membership, a $10,000 level membership. We've also included that here. And then we are members of the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council, and that's about $4,300. These are just the economic development organizations. I don't want to mislead you into thinking that these are all the organizations the city belongs to. I mean, we're still funding like the Junior Women's Club and things like that. But I just wanted to sort of focus just on economic development here for the purposes of this slide. When we were at the council goal setting session, one of the conversation points was about our tree canopy and making sure that our tree canopy was well protected, but that we realized there were certain issues with that tree canopy. There's several. If you go in certain neighborhoods, particularly my neighborhood, you'll find lots of dead or dying trees. There's not really a great plan to address that. There's some reticence on the part of staff also because nobody wants to touch the trees necessarily, but some of the trees, I think we all know, to have a healthy canopy, you need to get rid of some of the bad trees, so you let the other trees flourish and you replant new trees. So the conversation went along the lines of trying to find an urban forestry plan first, to have that laid out, a model and a strategy to do that. We are programming $25,000 from the tree fund, not from the general fund, to allow us to commission an urban forestry plan. We're also programming dollars from the tree fund to allow us to do some maintenance. Again, now it's saying, okay, let's try and get rid of those dead or dying trees, particularly if they're safety hazards, making better use of our internal resources where we can. And of course, we're continuing to replant trees. Our city arborist, Joe Ferris, does a great job in running that tree program and having trees put in where possible, where people are amenable to it. We also have other council priorities in terms of community initiatives that we've included in the FY25 budget. We are continuing the $10,000 contribution level for public art. We have also included $60,000 for the Centennial Celebration. This $60,000 is being funded from unassigned fund balance, and it's being added to the $40,000 that the committee already has. So the $100,000 that they've requested for the Centennial Celebration. We are continuing to fund the Volunteer Board Appreciation Dinner to the tune of about $1,500. That's a great event, started last year. I think it was Vice Mayor Abel's suggestion. And it's a great opportunity to, again, thank people for the service that they've done to our community. Yeah. One area that I'd like to focus on now is the building fund. So last year, we created a building fund, which was a statutory requirement, just to identify revenue coming in from building permit applications, for example, and costs to monitor and regulate that building permit function. When we created this, I think Jim and I both understood that there would probably be a deficit with that building fund. And in fact, that's what's happened. This upcoming year, we're programming an $82,000 general fund subsidy to the building fund. And we don't want to continue the subsidy. Obviously, if there's a structure that says you have to have a building fund, we'd like it to be reasonably balanced. So in looking at this critically, one of the conversation points that came up was the notion that we haven't upgraded our fees or changed our fees in over 20 years. And in over 20 years, I'm sure every other municipality around us has probably changed their building permit fees. So we need to take a critical look at that. Under Florida statute, as I understand it, you cannot just go ahead and change your building fees. You have to actually commission a study first. So we are proposing to commission a study to the cost of about $25,000 from unassigned fund balance. Once the study is completed, we would bring those recommendations to the council. Based on experience in the past, and also since we haven't upgraded the fees in so long, I would imagine some of the recommendations may be pretty dramatic. So we'll probably have to have some sort of a phased or moderated approach to doing that. But it needs to be looked at so that we don't, again, fall so far behind that we are not doing ourselves a service. So getting now to the end of just sort of conclusion here. So the total general fund budget as programmed as of today for FY25 is $37,837,076. It represents an increase of $1,624,704 budget to budget. That's exclusive of that $4.5 million state award we received for the EOC. This budget also still allows us to contribute a small amount, about $56,000, to the unassigned fund balance, which I think is a good practice. If we can, we should continue to make those contributions moving forward. Now, this final slide is really an opportunity for just to plant a seed with the council in terms of what future budgets. The capital process. So the capital process today is when we do capital projects, you'll see this on Thursday. We'll have the hearing, or the meeting, I should say. We'll go through it. This is public setting. We're recording this right now, so the public will be able to see it. And we'll talk about the budget for each capital project. In July, we come back. We do it again, more refined once we have more detail. And then in September, we'll have a public hearing on that those capital projects as part of the budget. And then what happens here is that once we go out to bid for those projects, we come back again and bring those to City Council's attention again. So there's in essence four opportunities for the public to see what's going on with that capital program. Some communities have moved away from that process, and what they typically will do is once you've gone through the budget process and you've had all these hearings and these public meetings, it's understood that the public knows what's going to happen. And as long as the project, when it's bid, doesn't go over budget, for example, then it doesn't come back for a fourth time. It's just put into place. And that saves some time because you don't have to do the notice and wait to come to City Council. But I understand it is a difference and a change of approach. So we're just putting it out there as a discussion item at this point. Another thing that I'd like the council to consider is currently we have a 20% target for our unassigned fund balance ratio to the operating budget. As council knows, if you read the audit, we far exceeded that unassigned fund balance ratio. And in fact, that is part of the reason why on Thursday you'll see we have a dramatic use of unassigned fund balance for capital to draw that number down. Even as you'll see Thursday, even in drawing that number down, we're still going to be fairly robust in terms of unassigned fund balance. So what I'd like to do is propose that we set 25% as the new floor for unassigned fund balance. I think that's a nice conservative approach, provides us some protection should we have natural disasters, hurricanes, things like that require cash. And also offers us the ability, moving forward, to address some of our future capital projects. We know we have several that are coming up that are going to be large ticket items. If we can fund some of those costs from unassigned fund balance and not entirely have to go into the bond market, for example, or the bank loan market, it would be more economical for the city. And with that, I'll take any questions.
So, can we start by going back to the slide? Was one of the earlier slides where you talked about transitioning some of the positions. We talked about the deputy city attorney, that slide. There we go. So, okay. Council, I just taken a hunch that there might be some questions or discussion about some of this. I don't know if there is or not. Councilmember Fernandez.
Could we just do a really brief overview of the process that the departments go through as they're preparing their budget? Just how they consider what their needs are going to be for the upcoming year.
So I don't know if every single department does it exactly the same way, but I think the majority of them do. So they typically look at where they are. So if you see the budget documents you have in your possession, you'll see that there's a FY24 budget column. There is a year-end estimate that they have to put in. There's a request, an FY25 request, and then there's a column that says CM 2.0, which is the city manager's final budget number that's coming before you this evening. In most cases, it's the same as the request. In some cases, it might not be, where I might have made changes to what the department requested. But typically what they'll do is they'll look at, do they have is their personnel where they feel it needs to be? And if it isn't, they'll make requests for either new staff or reconfiguration of staff, which leads us to some of these items that you have before you here this evening, this morning, I should say. They'll look at costs that they know that they can, identify already. Look, hey, this cost for these dues and memberships, we know it's going up by 5% or 10%, whatever. So they put that in there. In other cases, as I mentioned earlier, they'll apply an inflation factor for, of the vast number of supplies. For example, if you see the fire department budget, there's line after line after line of different supplies for different activities that they do. So they've applied more of just an across the board inflation number. We have critical conversations when we go at the meeting with the city manager and the finance director. When the department directors come in, they have to defend their budget. So we go through it line by line. We ask things like, okay, well, you're asking for money for next year for this, but you haven't even spent the money for this year that you have already for it. So why don't you look to invest it now versus waiting to put it on the next year's budget? So those are the kinds of conversations we have. So there are changes that are made throughout that process that may not even be reflected here if we can already address it in the current budget. And sometimes the department directors, their requests are met. Sometimes they're not. You'll see that you have that in your backup, so you can see, hey, I've asked for other positions, and the manager didn't include them in the budget. So that's generally the process. If there's a specific,
No, I just wanted for people that are watching or will watch just a brief overview of how it works so that they know how much consideration has gone in on the staff side and your end to make sure that the budget is filling the goals that we have as a council and a city, but also very fiscally responsible. That's it.
yeah, there's a lot of work that goes into the budget. So I have to give credit to all the department directors and their staffs, because before they even get to us, they've already spent hours upon hours putting it together. And then obviously Jim and his team, they've worked for weeks on this to this point. We start this process in, was it March here?
Yeah, March, and really get into it in April.
Right.
I would like to add one point to that question. It's really important that we always try to look at the year-end estimates, because what we budgeted for 24 may not always, there may be changes that happen during the year. And so we don't just want to focus on last year's budget number, although it's helpful. We have to look at the year-end estimate. It might be under, it might be over. We try to make adjustments accordingly to the most current information.
And one of the things that I've made clear when I've met with all the departments. We had town hall meetings back in April with all the different departments, and I made clear to all the city team members, one of the overriding goals that we have is to be prudent with the public dollars. We try to make sure that the millage rate stays. We don't want to increase the millage rate. Where obviously there may be a point at some in the future where that may be necessary, but where we can, we try our best not to do that, because we recognize that our residents have a lot of costs already. So if we can keep that down, that's our goal.
Council members?
Can we go back to the FTEs?
Sheet.
Okay. Knee jerk. It looks like it's technically going up, I would think. I mean, we're adding a quarter here and a quarter there, and so where are we taking away that what are we doing away with in order to maintain the whose department's getting word, I guess, for lack of a better word, who's not getting what they were looking for, whether it be last year's allotment or proposal.
So in terms of the FTE number, so we made some changes this past year. For example, in dispatch, we had an FTE in dispatch that this community had budgeted for years and years and years, and it never once been filled. I think it was aspirational that they would have, I think it was 13 dispatchers, and they never ever got to that point. So we looked at that, and we're making other changes in dispatch, and we decided, we're not going to we're not going to need that position. So we lost that FTE, for example. So that's one place where we gained some savings. And that was fine because, again, we had never filled it. In grounds and public works, also through attrition, we've had an opening. Jason, looking at efficiencies there. Now we have the street side, we have grounds. He's trying to figure out, is there an economy of scale? So we have an FTE there as well that, again, we decided not to fill. So those are the kind of things, those are where we've picked up FTE savings. In terms of requests for this year in the budget, those are outlined in your backup, so the actual requests. So we had several, for example, in community development that were asked for that we didn't fill. Strategically, there's rationales for all of that. We're looking. I want to make sure that our departments, before we add people, I want to make sure that we understand fully, is there a better way to do the business that we're doing first? And so that's the approach we took.
The overall dollar value for these FTE changes and so forth, any idea what that was? A net?
So back.
Everybody's looking backward. Sorry, Jennifer.
In the back row, they're stuck.
They
I mean, the bottom line,
I can do the calculation and get back with you.
We need to have you guys come up to the microphone.
I'll save her the trip because I know what she's going to say. So I think if you would let us, we'll provide that to you. Right now, we don't have the sum of what you're looking for, the net that you're looking for, but we can get that to you between now and Thursday's next.
Yeah, because the number of FTEs doesn't have any equation in the overall millage rate in the budget itself. I mean, it's nice and everything, but if we know what the actual net dollars are that are impacting the budget, that's a number we can work with, or yes or no, and or whatever. So I think that's an important concept for that one.
Is it? Right. But that increase in dollars is also included in the 1.1 or 1.2 number, whatever that was. I forgot the
Yeah.
different points.
Yes. No, I realize that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, council members.
Now,
So I do have a question. So the tuition, actually probably a couple of them, the tuition reimbursement program, are we, which I'm in favor of it, it had gone away and it was kind of my initiative to bring it back a few years ago. So I'm happy to hear that it's being used and that it's being used to the point where we need to expand it. That was our goal. So my question is, are we just changing the individual funding parameters, like you're eligible to get more money per year, or is it necessary to increase the amount of money that we're putting into that program altogether? Are we just changing the internal dynamics, or are we increasing the funding?
A little of both. We're just increasing the funding by about $1,000 so we can basically, we are proposing to increase the opportunity for each employee to get, rather than $2,000, to get $3,000. We anticipate that we might have about 7 people who take advantage of it during the year. So that's why we had $20,000 in the budget. We're increasing it to $21,000 to just allow us to have an even $3,000 per person. So those are the changes we're looking at.
Do you feel like it's sufficient? I mean, do we have people that are not able to access this because we don't have the funding, or are we able to?
Well, no, as far as I know, we've never turned anybody away.
It's just the dollar amount that you've been reimbursing is high. You would like it to be a little higher. Therefore, because the dollar amount would be higher based on the number of people applying, that's why we would need to increase the ballot. Okay.
Correct. Yeah, we're trying to. If we can provide a little bit more of a financial incentives, it might help people obviously get through their program faster and get the value back to the organization. It also would be another incentive for people to consider. We've tried. Council recalls, we had more money in this budget. I think we had $35,000 in this line item, and we reduced it to $20,000 last year because we didn't have a whole lot of folks taking advantage of it. I think we've seen a little bit of an uptick this year. Tony and his team, they're continuing to market this as one of the package of benefits that we offer. I think at some point, if we get more demand, then we'll come back to council and say, hey, maybe we need to add some extra dollars so that we can provide 10 people with reimbursements or 15 or whatever that number might be. But right now, I'm pretty comfortable with where we are.
Okay. So I just a comment, really, not really a question per se, but for anybody who's watching, I don't know if anybody watches budget meetings or not, but if they do, this is very intentional, what we're doing with the budget. This is not a whack-a-mole kind of thing. This is very intentional, and it's very intentionally heavy on the investment that we make in human capital and our employees and the employee development. There's a lot of leadership opportunities in here. There's succession planning. There's building in some opportunities. We're right-sizing some of our departments, bringing in good talent, developing that talent with the goal that people will come here and stay here for their career, like many of you are. But to provide that high quality and that high performing organization, which is what we're trying to get to. So this is the property tax increase that we got from the valuation going up 1.1. It was all eaten up by salary increases and those kinds of things. So it's stuff is cheap, people are expensive, and human capital, good human capital, doesn't come for free, particularly in this market, in this region. Everybody wants to come to Florida, and most of those people want to come to the Tampa Bay region. So talent here is particularly expensive. And to be competitive and to draw good talent away from all the other opportunities that people have, Tampa, Hillsborough County, the people that work for USF, Moffett, I mean, there's a lot of good opportunity here. And to maintain that competitiveness, we have to really up our game, which we've done. And so I think this is good. I like what you've done with the transitioning of the FTEs and moving some of those. We've talked about that. I think those are good opportunities. I also think that positions us to increase our efficiency and effectiveness in the future. We talk about Sterling Council, the Governor Sterling Award. We talk about things like that. This is getting us to where we need to be, I think. So I don't have any qualms with what we can nickel and dime it. I think $25K for a building fee study seems a little high to me. I don't know how many things they're going to be looking at, but in the big scheme of things, that's not, we could haggle over $100 here and there. That doesn't get us anywhere. So,
Okay.
yes.
Okay. A couple other things. I don't want to get too deep into the weeds of some of this stuff, but going back to the overall budget process, my experience has been often where I say, well, last year's budget was X, so this year's budget's going to be this. And to Jim's point, you can't do that because there's changes that happen throughout the year. So your budget transition goes from where am I ending up this year? What do I need for next year? So I don't ever look at what the old budget was. However, having said that, I do have one question on intergovernmental and the revenue options. Can you define that in about 30 words or less, what we're considering for that? Case in point, the budget last year was 9-point-something million and the actual was $4 million. And I just was curious as to, does this have to do with the grants or, okay, all right, that's.
Well, the big hit is the 4.5 million for the EOC. That was in the budget, both as an expenditure and as a revenue. So they washed out. But it will show the bottom line expenditure and the bottom line revenue higher than what we are this year because we don't have a big number like that. The other thing was we did use about $500,000 in ARPA money that we recognized in both revenue and expense for the new police CAD system.
Okay.
So most of intergovernmental is grants and that sort of thing. It also includes state shared revenues where they pass on down certain taxes and different revenues that the state collects that they pass on down a percentage to the city.
Okay, that's what I thought it was. I just wanted for clarification. Okay, strategic business opportunity, AKA Soaring City, or previously it was Soaring City. Everybody knows how I felt about that to begin with, so that's no great loss. What's that going to be? That's almost like a little bit of a black hole. Can we define that a little better?
I can speak to that if you want. And that's a good thing for us to talk about, so thank you for bringing that up. That was my suggestion. And I don't know. I don't know if we'll spend a dime of that money or not. But because Soaring City is not going to exist, I don't know if somebody else is going to step up and, like a chamber, if somebody else is going to say, let's have a Temple Terrace Business Expo, or let's do this. I don't know if that opportunity is going to come up or not. But if it did come up and they says, hey, can the city buy into this and be a silver sponsor or whatever, we wouldn't have anything in the budget to do that. And so, actually, if you recall, we budgeted 10,000 for Soaring City, but we didn't give it all to them. We gave it to them in sponsorships, and we sponsored, I think it was $5,000 for the Business Expo. So we didn't spend the other $5,000 we still have.
No, I realize that.
But this would just keep that money available if somebody came up and said, we're going to have some kind of business expo, or we're going to have some kind of, I don't know what it would be, but we'd have the ability to be part of that.
We need to maintain our place at whatever
Yeah.
table comes.
Now, if you want to cut that, I mean, I just thought it would be smart to have that ability. If it came up, we had the
I think
fund.
I'd just call it economic development.
Well, you got an EDC there. That won't confuse it. But the language of it is. I just want to make sure we're on the same page, that it's kind of just sort of a placeholder at this point. So if a seat opens up at a table, we can be there if necessary.
That's what it is.
Okay.
I don't care what we call
All
it.
right.
Whatever works for everybody. It doesn't matter to me.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
I just thought it'd be smart.
Just a better definition. That's all. I just want to make sure we're on the same page with it. Regarding the tree canopy.
Well, I think Meredith had something on.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's about Soaring City. If you
Okay.
So I know we got an email about this, but I don't recall, was there a timeline for when it's going to be dissolved? It's just kind of hypothetically going to be dissolved?
Yeah, I don't have anything from Soaring City directly. I learned this from USF, so I don't know.
So conceivably, if it was that entity that put on a business expo or something like that, that $5,000 that's in the budget could conceivably go toward that if we wanted to support
Sure.
that.
Huh?
Okay, that's all. I'm sorry. Gil, go ahead.
No, they still have never supplied, they have not supplied the tax returns that I had asked for.
The documentation.
Yeah,
you
the
asked for. I
documentation,
remember
just
that,
where the
yeah.
money's going. So, we're just paying somebody else's salary with that, which I've always objected to. The tree canopy program, where, public property or residential, or what would that cover?
So the tree canopy, well, the study itself, depending on how they do it, would probably look at the entire tree canopy of the city. So from an aerial perspective, it would probably be private trees and public trees to get an understanding, like the LiDAR that the
LiDAR, yeah.
the mayor's mentioned before. But strategically, any kind of strategy steps, I think, would be oriented more towards our public properties, our rights of way, our park properties, et cetera, figuring out, like, hey, as the city, what should we be doing with our own inventory of trees?
Okay.
And I think it will also complement the work we've already done in terms of our replanting program and things like that, which helps our residents also.
Well, that's the way our ordinance is written, or rewritten, when we last changed it. So I don't know if we had to modify that. It's something that needs to be, you need to be aware of it so that we can do it, in the proper manner. Okay, good. Now that's the question. The unassigned fund balance, how much is in there right now?
It's a little over 18 million.
Okay.
Oh.
Okay. All right, that's good. And I am in full support of the 25% threshold. That makes very good business sense, very good accounting sense. And, I'm totally in favor of that. And if I could read my own writing. Succession planning.
Wait, before you leave that, if I may.
Yeah.
So while we're on that 25% goal, that's set by ordinance, is it not?
I don't think so.
Yes. I think we have an ordinance in it.
It's either a policy or an ordinance. Well, whichever. whichever version it is, we would bring that to you.
Okay, so is there any reason why we couldn't have some discussion about that now, or does that need to be an agenda item at a council meeting, or?
You could have the discussion now.
All right, so what are you,
I mean, if it's just policy and we don't have to worry about an ordinance right now, I'm totally in favor of the 25%. No matter how it happens, I'm just saying, I could tell you right now, yes to the
Well,
25% policy.
and you are, and I am, and,
I have a question.
okay. Yes,
Didn't you say that there's some sort of standard coming into play about it even being higher than that, maybe in the 35% range?
So there's the GASB, the General Accounting Standards Board, governs public financial operations, if you will, municipal financial operations. And every year they come out with a different numbered iteration of a recommendation, like GASB 45, GASB, no, whatever the number is. And usually that means, as an administrator, what that means for me is like it's just going to cost us more money to do business, unfortunately. He would probably disagree. I'm sure if I answer more time, more money. But it's for a good reason, but sometimes it gets into a lot of accounting minutia. So as far as I know, and Jennifer or Jim can correct me, I don't think there's been an actual GASB numbered directive yet on this issue. But there has been conversation at a recent government finance officers conference, which was held here in Orlando, that our staff attended, where it appears that the discussion is now going towards making 35% sort of the suggested unassigned fund balance ratio. 35% would be a big number. There are a lot of communities that are going to struggle to hit 35%. I'm not suggesting that here. I mean, obviously, if we get a directive and we'd have to move in that direction, that's a different conversation. I think we definitely should take steps to move us to be a little bit more conservative and have that floor be a little bit more robust at 25%, knowing that we are, again, even today where we are, obviously today we're beyond that, and even with the changes we're recommending, and particularly Thursday, I still think we're going to be beyond the 25% at the end of the day. At some point that might change, and I think you want to have that floor so you know as a directive, like we don't want to go below that point.
So follow-up question, in the past, we were shooting for 20%, and now we're talking about moving that threshold to 25%, which I totally support, but you said we exceeded the 20% threshold, and by how far did we exceed that?
Today?
Close to 50.
Today we are probably in the upper 40%,
Wow.
right?
That's why that's what the balance was.
Higher.
Yeah, potentially. Depending on how you measure it. When we did the audit, the auditor measured, and he included a lot of reserves that we wouldn't necessarily account for in unassigned fund balance. So that number was a little higher than we thought it should be. But we believe we're probably in the upper 40% right now. And the projects that and the expenditures we're going to suggest to you on Thursday will drop that into a more reasonable number.
yeah, that was my comment, is we might be there now, but we won't be there for very long, because we want to build this riverfront park. We're doing a study for the police station, I think some of that money's coming out of there, so we have money out of that slated to be spent.
But the general fund's at 38 million. The general fund proposed budget, with an unassigned fund balance of 18 million, just do the long division. You know, that puts you about where you're going to be. And then my last comment, then I'll shut up, is succession planning. I think it's important, it's critical. I've always been in favor of growing our own leadership. We know who we deal with. Staff does a fantastic job with growing their people, and it's a lot. You know what you're dealing with, and we know who the people are. We know what we've got. So I believe the succession planning is a very wise move, and endorse it and support it wholeheartedly. And I'll shut up.
So I want to go back to the 25% question, because we didn't land the plane. Do we want to do that? I mean, I think everybody wants, okay, so
We will
I don't know what establishes that, but whatever it is,
we'll start.
we'll start the process of, yeah. As long as, let me put a caveat on that, at least I think I can put, from my opinion anyway. As long as we can still continue to fund the things that we want to, I don't want this 25% now to say, well, there goes the riverfront park, because we can't fund it anymore because that takes us down below 25%. Do you see what I'm saying? If there's then there's another discussion to be had.
So, okay. I don't think you're going to run the risk of that with the budget we're going to present to you on Thursday. I think we're going to be I'm using the example you brought up, the Riverfront Park. We are proposing to fund pretty much the entirety or nearly the entirety of what we project that park will cost out of unassigned fund balance and some other and TIF dollars and things like that. So we'll be fine. I don't think anything we're going to bring to you is going to cause you to get down below 25%.
Okay.
However, having said that, I think if you are going to impose 25%, that should be a sort of a hard and fast rule. I mean, that's going to be like your floor. You need to be comfortable with that, because the purpose of having that is so that you remember that you don't want to go below it, because if you have issues with, like I said, if there's a storm or there's some other issue, you want to have those dollars. It's still a target, so I said but I think we need to be careful. I think I'd want our team to consider it as, like, we don't want to go below it. Like, we're going to do everything possible to stay at 25 or above. Council has that liberty. Even, I got to check. If it's in an ordinance, we'd have to really take a closer look. If it's just a policy, obviously, then you have more flexibility. But I think it's important to have it as sort of your benchmark. Like, this is what we want to do.
No, I agree, and that's why I want to make sure that we know what we're asking, because I think anyway, at least in my perspective, I don't know how everybody else feels, but there are some projects that are big projects that I think are investments in our future, like this green space, the parks down there along the riverfront, the study for the police station. These are investments in our future, and we've committed to doing these things. We have a funding source to do it. What I wouldn't want to do is say, well, we said 25%. Well, now we've just lost, because you're right, it should be a hard, fast thing. Well, if we spend that money now, we're only going to be at 22, so we can't do that anymore. So if that's going to put us in that position, I think we need to have a discussion about, do you want to do 25% now, or do you want to wait a year? Or because it should be a hard floor. And I just don't want to jeopardize some of the things that we are going to use that money for now. That make sense?
It does, and I don't, like I said, I don't think you're at risk.
Okay.
I would, at some point, you probably will get there. But right now, in the short to medium term, I think you'd be okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't know if we need to wait a year to make that decision. I'd like to wait till Thursday at lunch after we're done with the capital talk. So,
Oh, until we make the decision about the 25?
yeah, I mean, I support that a lot, but your concerns, we'll know more after capital.
Okay. Well, I don't know.
It's not a Thursday decision, but to your point.
Yeah, I think we have consensus that we'd all
Sure.
like to adjust the.
Yeah, get
I mean,
in.
I don't know what the right time to make that move is, whether it's now or whether it's after the budget is. I don't know the appropriate time. You'll have to help us with that. But obviously we have consensus that we all would like to adjust the amount.
I think the point is, once it's made, we're held to that number.
Yes.
Okay? And if we violate or deviate from that number to the negative, it's going to be an audit item. And then the whole world's going to know it. So, I mean, there are not trade-offs, but there are checks and balances to what happens with that. And it just comes back to prudent management of the funding. So I'm totally comfortable with the way things are going and the direction that they're moving in. So that's the only reason I brought that up.
Anything else, Councilman? Yes.
I just have a couple of things. For the required retirement contributions, when do we have those from the actuary right now, or are we giving it our best estimate?
There's obviously the police and the fire pension. Those, the actuary determines that a year and a half ahead. So yes, we have exactly the amount that they have determined that we need to pay in fiscal year '25, and those numbers are plugged into this budget.
Okay, so that's not going to change for this budget.
Nope.
Okay, so that was one question. And then I see, I know that we're funded for a lot of the projects that we want to do, or for maybe some activities like the tree canopy program. But will we still be looking for maybe grants or other funding sources, even though theoretically we do have the budget established? And I know we'll talk about the capital Thursday, but would we still be looking that grants or other funding sources might help replace what we are going to be spending, so we don't actually have to spend it out of our tax dollars?
Yes, Terrace may want to speak to this, but we actually talked about the tree study, or the, what was it called? The urban forestry plan, as possibly seeking a grant for that. We do have the 8 tree money we can use if we can't get a grant. And I know the police and the fire department are always working on seeking grants. So just because we have all this unassigned fund balance, we're not giving up seeking for grant funding where applicable.
Wouldn't that East Civis project also will give you an opportunity for, grants come up every day. And so what you do a budget now, the grants are going to be available, could be tomorrow. And the East Civis, I think it's called, isn't it?
It's called,
will help identify that. And, Leisure Services does a fantastic job with scrounging for grants and so forth.
I just wanted for the discussion for people who might be watching later to see that just because we are funded for projects that have been proposed, that city staff is still looking to see if there are other funding sources that could help supplement or replace what we might be spending out of city funds. That doesn't mean that we're staff is not still looking. So,
Absolutely.
but that's it for me.
Councilman?
I have no questions. I have a comment.
Go ahead.
Are we done with questions? Okay.
It's a blurry line.
It is a blur.
Budget meetings are a little blurrier than council meetings.
It's a workshop. I just wanted to say thank you to the staff. I know we're all going to feel the same way. The backup information that was provided to us was excellent. Thank you very much. Your presentation today was concise, answered the questions. You presented us a budget that takes care of our employees, both with salaries and insurance, increases in insurance. We're even with the expenditure of unassigned fund balance. We're still adding to that. We're not changing the millage. It's a lot of hard work that you and your staff have done. Thank you, department heads. So thank you. That's all I wanted to say. It's a good budget. And, budget's a roadmap. We may deviate a little off of it, but it's a good roadmap.
Thank you.
I'll echo that. Thank you.
I think it's, again, I wish all 27,000 people were sitting here because I don't know who's watching, but I think it's important for the public to understand a few things. And one is, most people don't know this level of detail about their city's budget. I mean, who does? Not too many people follow that. The casual observer says, well, the property tax valuation went up, so you have all this additional revenue coming in, so that makes up for the higher costs of everything. But as we can see, that's not entirely true, because the property tax evaluation, the valuation went up $1.1 million worth of revenue, which was totally absorbed by an increase in wages. So that money went away just because of wages, which is fine. The point I'm getting at is all the other expenses for everything we buy, gas, cars, diesel, all the stuff that we buy, tires, we're paying the same thing that the consumer, that our residents are paying. So all of those increases are not made up by the increase in property valuation. Those are hard costs that have gone up. And we've done, I think, an admirable job of finding efficiencies internally so that we save enough money through those efficiencies to kind of absorb those increases. But we can't do that year after year after year. I mean, at some point, we're gonna have things as lean as they can be. I mean, there's not gonna be anything, there'll always be small things to tweak, but we'll have these inefficiencies all fixed, and now what? And now we talked about the pavement, it used to be $60 and now it's $212 or whatever. Well, that's real money. And so at some point, I don't know what the economy is going to do exactly, but at some point here, we're going to have to find new revenue coming in order to keep this thing moving. So I think the public needs to be aware of that, and I'm not sure, I mean, we're not increasing the millage now, but at some point, we're going to have new sources of revenue to keep this thing going on the track that we're trying to go on. So,
I would like to echo where Councilman Chambers had said, but to the staff and to the finance, to you, Carlos. And I remember early budgets in my tenure where you spent half the time figuring out how we got to last year's number, and moving forward, and not having the opportunity to really discuss and peel back the onion on what we want to do for the next year. So I just, excellent presentation, very good details, and we can trust the numbers, and that hasn't always been the case. So thank you to all the department heads and all the staff and everybody that contributed to this, because I've been doing budgets for 35 years, and this is a good one. This is easy to work with. Thank you.
you remember the 3-inch binders
Oh, my God.
that you got 3 minutes before the meeting started?
If then, yes, no. And well, how did you get from here to there?
Oh.
Doesn't make sense. And I know even before I was on council, I was helping finance back then, so it's,
And it made even less sense after you asked the question.
That's right.
Got the answer, it made less sense.
yep. Those are the good old days. This is so much better to work with. Thank you.
Yep. The people who are laughing are the ones that were here. They
Yes,
know what we're
they
talking about. The new folks, they don't get it. But.